Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hello, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. When we started out Psychotactics, one of the earliest books that we bought was from a marketer called Jay Abraham. This is going back all the way to around 2001, and websites were relatively new and online purchasing was also brand new. But he had this one book that he sold for over $300. The book was large and rather thick, maybe 300 to 500 pages, and it took us several months to get through just the first few chapters. Part of the reason was that marketing was brand new to us, but also that we needed to assimilate at least a bit of the learning that we had been reading in all of those pages. There was no YouTube, email marketing was non-existent. In fact, we got a whole bunch of sales letters in the mail that caused us to buy this book. You could safely say that it was a different time. But would we go back? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. And yet, it's a rhetorical question. It's a question that doesn't need an answer, because none of us would go back in time. But not going back in time means that we are stuck in this state of overwhelm. We are constantly pummeled with more books, more courses, more information that we could ever consume, let alone implement. What are we to do? How are we to go about it and manage this situation? But first, let's get one thing out of the way. We live in a different world. Today, we can book our own tickets online. We can book hotels. We can find out the traffic as we're headed into town and take different routes. All of that complexity, that is our world today. That is something that we would not swap for 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago. We like what we have right now. We like our phones. We like our computers. We would not want to go back to a time which was simpler, less complicated, and less technologically advanced, because we would have to depend on travel agents and maps and paper maps, in fact, and things that today would drive us absolutely crazy. So one thing is very clear. We don't really want to go back in time. And when we started at Psychotactics, I was very naive. I thought that within about 4 or 5 years, we would have all the information that we needed, and we would have enough articles and enough content to keep us going pretty much for the rest of our lives. But that hasn't happened. We've had to record podcasts since 2014. We've had articles running since pretty much the start of Psychotactics, which is in 2000. Everything that we've done, we've had to continue doing. Plus, you have to continue learning. How do you cope with this learning was the problem that I had to deal with. Because like you and like everybody else, we feel this overwhelm. I had to think up an analogy that would help me through my day-to-day frustration, and it was frustration. The analogy goes like this. I wake up every day, go for lunch to a buffet, and there in front of me would be 20, 30, 50 dishes. And the first time you and I go to a buffet, we just overeat. We want to eat just a little bit of this and that, and we don't actually want to overeat, but we end up overeating anyway. And then I imagined myself going to the same buffet every day of the week, every month of the year. How would I change the way I operated in such a situation? And I realized that I didn't have to eat every meal. There was no compulsion to even complete every meal. I could eat as much as I needed and then stop. And so I'd open a book, and if it were interesting, then I would continue reading to the end. But if it were boring, then I would just stop. Or if I'd already got something from the book and it was something that needed several weeks or months of planning, well, that would be it. So in this way, you approach it as a meal, and once you're satisfied, even if you're not full, but you're satisfied, then you stop eating and you can eat another dish, or you can eat on another day. And this is how I've had to deal with overwhelm. And that brings us to the end of the podcast. If you're still keen, you might want to read the book called Suddenly Talented. It's at psychotactics.com/talent. It shows you why doable greatness is better than genius. Bye for now. Still listening? Before the pandemic, I used to go out to the cafe sometimes around 2:30 or 3 p.m. because the cafes were all open, at least in Auckland, until 4 p.m. And then we had the pandemic, and all the cafes started closing at around 2 or 2:30 p.m., which meant at the precise time I wanted to go out, they were closed. And it's been 3 years, and even this week and the week before that, and every single week, I bring up this topic that the cafes are closing much too early for my liking. And it's only when I was doing this podcast that I realized, well, I'm doing the same thing as everybody does with overwhelm, which is we're already in this situation and we have to find a way out of it rather than complaining about it. So now it's 10:30 a.m. and if I want to go to the cafe today, then I might as well go now instead of waiting and complaining at the end of the day. So I'm off now. Bye for now and see you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye.